India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in Russia this week. The occasion was the 22nd annual summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. It was also PM Modi's first bilateral visit after winning a third straight term. Hello and welcome to Connecting the Dots. I'm Bhattacharya. Let's connect the dots of India-Russia ties amid tensions between Russia and the West over the Ukraine conflict and growing Moscow-Beijing ties. 1. PM Modi chose Russia for his first bilateral visit in his third term. He broke with the tradition of India's new Prime Minister travelling first to a neighbouring country. He had gone to Bhutan in his first term and to Maldives in his second term. This time, it was Russia. 2. The previous annual summit was in December 2021 in New Delhi. So for 2.5 years, there were no annual summits due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine conflict. But that did not mean cooling off of ties. Here's why. In the weeks after the Russia-Ukraine military conflict started in February 2022, President Putin helped India safely evacuate its citizens from the conflict zone. Then, in September that year, the two leaders met on the sidelines of the SCO summit in Samarkand, Uzbekistan. They also stayed in touch with each other through several telephonic conversations. 3. Given the current geopolitical context, the annual summit was an opportunity for India to play a supportive role for a peaceful and stable region, preserve independence of action, and strengthen bilateral ties. The summit saw all those boxes ticked. For one, PM Modi played a peacemaker. Much like when he had met President Putin in Samarkand, PM Modi carried the message of peace. While PM had famously told President Putin in Samarkand that now is not the era of war, this time he told President Putin a solution cannot be found on the battlefield. He also expressed pain over a suspected Russian military strike on Ukraine's largest children's hospital.
एक्सेलेंसी युद्ध हो, संघर्ष हो, आतंकवादी हमले हो, मानवता में विश्वास करने वाला हर व्यक्ति जब जानहानि होती है तब बहुत पीड़ित होता है, लेकिन उसमें भी जब मासूम बच्चों की कत्ल होती है, मासूम बच्चों को मरते हुए देखते हैं, तब हृदय छलनी हो जाता है और वो दर्द बहुत भयानक होता है.
President Putin appreciated PM Modi's peace efforts.
I appreciate the attention you pay to the most pressing issues, including your efforts to find ways to resolve the Ukraine crisis, primarily through peaceful means.
Since the conflict started, PM Modi has been walking a hard diplomatic tightrope. New Delhi has not explicitly condemned Russia's attack on Ukraine. It has abstained from voting against Russia on many UNSC resolutions. But at the same time, it called for an international probe into the Bucha massacre and expressed concern over threats of nuclear war issued by Russian leaders. India says it is on the side of peace, international law and the UN Charter, and in a message to Moscow reiterates that respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of states is an essential element of the international order. When in June he met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Italy, he assured him that India would continue to do everything within its means to support a peaceful solution. There is a perception that India is positioning itself as a neutral player that can be a mediator between the two sides. Because PM Modi is one of the few world leaders who have had phone conversations with both President Putin and President Zelensky. Zelensky even invited PM Modi to Ukraine when the two leaders met in Italy. India participated in the Ukraine Peace Summit in Switzerland, though it did not sign the joint communique, and took the position that only those options that are acceptable to both parties can lead to abiding peace, meaning both parties to the conflict need to talk peace. Remember, Russia was not invited to the summit. Now, back in September 2022, Mexico had proposed that a committee including PM Modi, Pope Francis and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres should try to mediate in the crisis. The same month, Dr. S. Jaishankar disclosed that India had weighed in with Russia on grain shipments from Black Sea ports. New Delhi also conveyed to Moscow global concerns about the safety of nuclear plants in Ukraine. Bilaterally too, this visit marked a high point. In a special gesture, President Putin invited PM Modi to his home in the Moscow suburbs and hosted him to a private dinner. In this informal setting, PM Modi shared his concern on the recruitment of Indians as support staff to the Russian military. Russia promised their early discharge. 10 Indians have returned so far, but around 40 are believed to be still in Russia. So one of the biggest sticking points in the Russia-India equation was thus broadly addressed. The next day saw President Putin conferring PM Modi with Russia's highest state award, the Order of Saint Andrew the Apostle. This was in recognition of PM Modi's contribution to India-Russia ties. 4. Even while playing the role of a peacemaker, India has strongly defended its strategic autonomy in its dealings with Russia. Since the start of the Ukraine conflict, India successfully foiled all Western resistance to it buying discounted crude oil from Russia in the interest of Indian consumers. Listen to this.
I noticed you refer to oil purchases. If you are looking at energy purchases from Russia, I would suggest that your attention should be focused on Europe, which probably we do buy some energy which is necessary for our energy security. But I suspect, looking at the figures, probably our total purchases for the month would be less than what Europe does in an afternoon. So you might want to think about it.
In fact, India and Russia cooperated closely in recent times, particularly across the domains of energy, fertilizers and civil nuclear energy. Last year, India imported more than 80 mmT of crude from Russia. Affordable energy supplies helped keep price rise under check. Also last year, India imported over 48 lakh tons of fertilizers from Russia, critical in the context of farmers' interest and food security. Now, as far as civil nuclear cooperation goes, 2 units of 1,000 megawatt each of the Kudankulam nuclear power plant are already in operation in India. These are based on Russian technology. And 2 more units are in advanced stages of construction. Ties have now expanded in all these 3 domains and more. In fact, 9 new areas of economic cooperation have been identified. A bilateral trade target of $100 billion has been set for 2030. That's up from the current $65 billion. Both sides agreed on a bilateral settlement system using national currencies. They also agreed to speed up delivery of military supply parts. This is important because 60 to 70% of India's defense equipment is of Russian and Soviet origin and needs regular supply of spares for maintenance, even as both sides have embraced Make in India for joint defense co-production in India. 5. India-Russia ties stand on their own feet, unaffected by the Moscow-Beijing embrace. Upon his arrival in Russia, PM Modi was received by the first Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, Denis Montorov, who accompanied him to the hotel from the airport in the same car. Mr. Montorov is senior to the Deputy Prime Minister who received Chinese President during his visit to Russia. India read in this a special gesture. President Putin and President Xi Jinping have met twice in the last 4 months. But New Delhi wants to ensure that Beijing does not become a factor in their relationship. The question is that achievable? 6. The glue of soft power binds the people of India and Russia. Russians have embraced Indian culture, and at the heart of that embrace is their love for Hindi songs. Play Jimmy 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 from Hindi film Disco Dancer in Russia, and you are sure to see all Russians around you grooving and swaying to its beats. The song that stars veteran Indian actor Mithun Chakravarti was so popular when it released in 1984 in Soviet Russia that it almost became an anthem there. It was the peak of the Cold War then, and the USSR had severed cultural ties with the West. So generations of Russians grew up on Hindi songs. The younger generation still listens to them, but they have other favorites too, like Punjabi and South Indian music. You can spot them today on social media reels in Russia. Such cultural affinity between Indians and Russians is the icing on the cake called India-Russia ties. India's relationship with Russia is decades old. But what keeps this relationship alive and kicking are its people, besides its leaders. The annual summit has only reinforced a time-tested friendship. There is always good reason to keep this relationship on an even keel despite the headwinds. What you see on your screen are articles from a building being loaded to moving vans. But this is not an ordinary building. It is 10 Downing Street, the official residence and office of the UK Prime Minister. The address remains the same, but the addressee has changed with the change in the UK's political landscape. The Labour Party has won the general election, defeating the Conservative Party, which was in power for 14 years. Labour bagged more than 400 out of the 650 seats in the House of Commons in the UK Parliament.
Thank you so much for that reception. What an amazing reception. We did it!
Keir Starmer is the new Prime Minister. The reign of Rishi Sunak, the first British Indian to become UK's Prime Minister, has ended. Here's what Sunak said on his way out.
To the country, I would like to say first and foremost, I am sorry. I have given this job my all, but you have sent a clear signal that the government of the United Kingdom must change, and yours is the only judgment that matters. I have heard your anger, your disappointment, and I take responsibility for this loss.
Keir Starmer's win comes on the promise of change to Britain. But what does this change in UK politics mean for India? Here's what Starmer said after taking office.
Politics can be a force for good. We will show that. We've changed the Labour Party, returned it to service, and that is how we will govern. Country first, party second.
So he says the Labour Party has changed. But what does that mean? And how significant is this statement when it comes to Britain's relations with India? When we look back, we see that while it was during Labour leader and Prime Minister Clement Attlee's time in office that India gained independence from British colonial rule in 1947, in the last few decades, the Labour Party has had a strained relationship with India. In 2008, David Miliband, Foreign Secretary in the then Labour government led by Gordon Brown, urged New Delhi to resolve the Kashmir issue with Pakistan if it wants to prevent terrorist attacks such as the one in Mumbai in November 2008. The Mumbai terror attacks that lasted 4 days had just happened. India was upset with Miliband's remarks. It said the attacks were not connected to the J&K issue and were part of global terrorism. India-Labour ties got worse after Jeremy Corbyn became the Labour leader in 2015. Corbyn's criticism of India on the Kashmir issue became a major bone of contention. After India abrogated Article 370 from its constitution, ending the special status of Jammu and Kashmir in 2019, the Labour Party passed a resolution condemning India over Kashmir and calling for international intervention. The Indian government saw that as an attack on India's sovereignty. This decision of the Labour Party cost it the votes of many British Indians. They did not vote for Labour in the 2019 UK general election. Now, if we go further back in time, we see that the Kashmir issue had bedeviled ties between India and the Labour Party from the late 1990s itself. In 1997, Queen Elizabeth II visited India and Pakistan to celebrate 50 years of their independence. But British Foreign Secretary Robin Cook's comments suggesting mediation on the Kashmir issue cast a shadow on that visit. A Labour Party politician, Cook made a stopover in Pakistan before landing in India, and there he offered to mediate on the Kashmir issue. New Delhi's stand, as is evident from the Simla Agreement and the Lahore Declaration, is that the Kashmir issue should be resolved directly between India and Pakistan bilaterally. So India was understandably upset with these comments. The then Indian Prime Minister Inder Kumar Gujral rejected the offer. Now turn the clock to 2024. Keir Starmer says it is a changed Labour Party. He admits his party made mistakes in the past regarding India, especially by supporting Pakistan on the Kashmir issue. He said Kashmir is an internal issue to be resolved by India and Pakistan in his meetings with the Indian diaspora and in his public addresses. He promised to get rid of any anti-India feelings within the party and fix the damaged relationship with the Indian community in the UK. See his post on X. Starmer wrote, and I quote, "A strategic partnership with India will be key to my Labour government. Together, we can tackle economic, climate and global security and build on our long-standing relationship. Today, I took the opportunity to say thank you for India's immense contribution to Britain." Starmer set the tone for his party's approach to India-UK relations during his speech at the India Global Forum last year. He had said, and I quote, "I have a clear message for you all today. This is a changed Labour Party. What my Labour government will seek with India is a relationship based on our shared values of democracy and aspiration." In its election manifesto, the Labour Party pledged to pursue a new strategic partnership with India. The manifesto even had a clear mention of a free trade agreement. Now, there is no doubt that UK has seen political turmoil in recent years. In the last 2 years alone, the country saw 3 different prime ministers. This interrupted FTA talks. The negotiations were initiated by former UK PM Boris Johnson in January 2022. However, Johnson was replaced by his party colleague Liz Truss in September 2022. Truss was then replaced by Rishi Sunak within a couple of months. New Delhi and London have been holding FTA negotiations for more than 2 years now. Key sticking points are India's demand for more access to the UK market for its goods and services, especially in sectors like IT, pharmaceuticals and textiles. The UK, on the other hand, is seeking lower import duties on goods like Scotch whisky and electric vehicles. Starmer has been critical of the delays in FTA under the Conservative government. He says his party wants to see the agreement cover more areas like security, technology, education and climate change. Now, with the change in government in the UK, there could be more uncertainty. India may have to reassess its strategy and approach towards the FTA talks, and the Labour government might bring new challenges and delays. But this could also be a chance to address broader issues and ensure that the agreement is fair and covers all aspects. Then comes the issue of immigration. New Delhi's demand for greater access for its skilled professionals in the UK market remains a contentious issue. Another key concern for India is security, given the increased activity of separatist elements in the UK. In March 2023, a group of about 50 people vandalized the Indian High Commission in London. The Indian government strongly protested to the UK authorities. I asked the then UK High Commissioner to India about the attack in an interview, and he told me that the UK government does not tolerate extremism in any form. The question is, will the new Labour government not tolerate that either? Now look at this picture. Keir Starmer, donning a tilak on his forehead and a floral garland around his neck, is making a namaste gesture. In the final days of the election campaign, he visited the Sri Swaminarayan Temple in Kingsbury, a prominent Hindu temple in London. His gesture can be seen as an attempt to reach out to the Indian diaspora voters who were largely expected to support the Conservative Party. The temple visit was also meant to convey a strong message of friendship with India. After Labour's resounding victory in the UK general elections, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke with Starmer and congratulated him. The two leaders agreed to conclude an FTA early and deepen the India-UK comprehensive strategic partnership. Now the questions that remain are, can India and the Labour Party erase past tensions, turn over a new leaf and start a glorious new chapter in the India-UK diplomatic ties? The proof of the pudding is in the eating. Nothing seems more refreshing than swimming or diving into a lake in the summer. But what if it turns out to be fatal? No, I'm not talking about drowning. Then what else? Brain-eating amoeba. Yes, you heard it right. Brain-eating amoeba has killed children in the southern Indian state of Kerala. They were infected with Naegleria fowleri, an amoeba that thrives in soil and warm freshwater lakes, rivers, ponds and hot springs. But it is not just India that is at the receiving end. A 25-year-old man died in Israel after contracting brain-eating amoeba. All these deaths were caused by the disease primary meningoencephalitis or PAM. It's a rare disease and almost fatal. The infection was triggered by Naegleria fowleri, a single-celled, free-living amoeba that infects the brain. This infection usually happens when people swim or dive in contaminated fresh water like lakes or rivers during the summer. Risk of contracting it increases when it's been hot for a long time, water temperature is high and water level is low. Some people got infected when they used tap water contaminated with this amoeba to cleanse their nasal passages. The infection enters the body through the nose and then travels to the brain, where it attacks the nerve tissue and causes inflammation. But this disease is not transmitted from human to human. Now, what are its symptoms? According to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, its early symptoms are fever, headache, nausea, and vomiting. But the disease progresses rapidly and people can show symptoms like stiff neck, confusion, lack of attention, loss of balance, and hallucinations. It typically leads to coma and death. CDC says most people who get this disease die within 1 to 18 days after they start showing symptoms. As PAM is a rare disease, its detection becomes hard. With no standard treatment available, prevention is crucial. So what can you do to minimize the risk? Hold your nose or wear a nose clip when diving into fresh water. Keep your head above water in hot springs. Avoid digging in shallow water and use sterile water for nasal cleansing. While infections are rare, recent cases in India and Israel highlight the importance of awareness. Remember, prevention is the best defense. That's all in this edition of Connecting the Dots. We'll see you next week with more raging issues. Until then, goodbye from all of us in the Delhi newsroom. This is Munmun Bhattacharya signing off. Take care and stay safe.